Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a really intense exploration. We're looking at the late autumn of the year of the Depend Adult Undergarment, the YDAU, and we're stepping into two worlds side by side that are both operating under just maximal pressure.
And these aren't just places on a map. We're talking about these meticulously constructed institutions, each one designed to push the human will to its absolute limit. One is all about physical perfection, and the other, well, it's about spiritual survival.
That's the critical duality, isn't it? Our source material gives us these incredibly detailed, sometimes, pretty unsettling windows into life at the Enfield Tennis Academy, the ETA, and right next door, the Ennett House Recovery Facility.
Right. And while one world is chasing, athletic glory and the other is just trying to achieve sobriety, they're both defined by these relentless, intense personal demands.
Demands that require this total, painful, and repetitive adherence to a fixed structure, but for completely different reasons.
Exactly. The ends are different, but the means are surprisingly similar.
Our materials are so rich here. On one side, we get this deep insight into the internal world of an elite tennis player, Hal Incandenza. We see his anxieties, how they're just like fraying at the edges, and then we see the logistical chaos that the Academy's leadership is dealing with.
And then, on the other side of the fence, literally, we're tracking the harrowing path of Don Gately. He's a resident staff member at Ennett House, and he's facing this wall of mandated sobriety and legal peril.
So our mission today for you is to get a really deep insight into what happens when individuals, whether they're top-tier athletes or recovering addicts, are pushed into a state of absolute focus, a state where that line between their internal world and the external chaos just sort of collapses.
We're really analyzing the emotional and logistical price you have to pay to achieve this highly focused existence. What does it cost?
Okay, let's unpack this. I think we have to start where the physical pressure cooker really begins, before the sun is even up, inside the head of Hal Incandenza. I mean, this is a kid who is the ultimate elite athlete, groomed for precision, but his internal foundation is, well, it's crumbling before his day even starts.
We have to begin with this traumatic recurring nightmare he's having. And it's so important to understand this isn't just, standard dream anxiety. This is a profound, a really visceral manifestation of psychological stress. It's tied to his entire identity, which is built on physical control.
Absolutely visceral. He's forced awake, and his immediate panic thought is about the cost of dentures. Why? Because in his dream, his teeth, the very structure of his jaw, are betraying him. They're described as becoming like shale. They just fragment the moment he tries to chew anything.
And then it just melts into grit in his mouth. He's constantly spitting out these fragments, scared, hungry, and just trapped in this horrifying cycle of oral rot and disintegration.
The detail is so excruciatingly specific. It really points toward this deep terror of vulnerability, doesn't it? But what makes the dream truly terrifying, what really amplifies his anxiety when he wakes up, is how everyone else in the dream reacts.
Right, the social reaction. Everyone there, and there's a figure named Teddy Shock, a peer, they all refuse to look in his crumbling teeth. They just look away, they check their watches.
Make these vague, polite excuses to leave.
Yeah. It's this universal avoidance. The unspoken consensus in the dream is that the splintering teeth are just a symptom of something else. Something, and this is the quote, way more dire and distasteful.
So they aren't just ignoring a physical problem. They're refusing to acknowledge the physical sign of a much deeper internal rot.
And that moves the dream beyond just physical decay. It's about a deep fear of being seen as fundamentally fragmented or, slawed on the inside. Hal is terrified that this internal decay, the real source of his anxiety and his isolation, is visible to everyone.
And the structure of his life, the academy itself, his peer group, it's all built to just ignore or look away from any kind of deep emotional vulnerability.
Exactly. The cost of admission into this elite world is silence. You don't talk about deep pain. And that just allows the fragmentation to continue in private.
Now, in that same pre-dawn quiet, there's another crisis unfolding, but this one is external. It's with his brother, Mario. And Mario is usually described as next to impossible to agitate. But he's showing some seriously unusual behavior. It's all centered on the headmaster's house.
Mario's entire focus is just fixed on the receiver there.
Yeah.
He's apparently been sleeping in a sleeping bag on an air mattress right in front of the set, just listening to WYYY 109.
And what's the source of the agitation? Madame Psychosis, who anchored this thoughtful late-night program called 60 Minutes More or Less, has taken an unannounced sabbatical. The station is being really evasive about where she is.
They tried to fill the void, right? There was misdiagnosis, a grad student reading dense critical theory from like Horkheimer and Adorno over this anesthetizing, slowed-down Partridge Family music.
Which sounds bizarre enough, but now even that substitute is gone. The station is just running the program with no voice at all.
Just the weird static ambient music that used to be the background score, and that silence, that vacuum of speech, that is the crisis for Mario.
And Hal, who knows his brother better than anyone, he notes that the sound now, without that familiar voice providing context or interpretation, is just unbearably disturbing. He describes it as sounding like somebody's mind coming apart right before your ears.
It's fascinating. For Mario, whose whole internal life seems to depend on routine, on structure, on familiar and steady stimuli, this sudden void is profoundly unsettling.
The disappearance of this constant, this mysterious, trusted voice, and it's replaced by this momentumless static decay. It suggests a crisis of stability for him that is just deeply shaking him.
It's a direct echo of the fragmentation Hal is dreaming about, isn't it? But for Mario, it's triggered externally. It's a break in his media consumption routine. If the consistent structures that you rely on suddenly dissolve into static, what does that say about your own stability?
It really elevates the significance of this radio program. It's way more than just entertainment for him.
Yeah, it's an anchor.
Yeah.
And everyone around them seems to notice his agitation. It's this quiet, internal thing that Hal is just sort of quietly observing.
Okay, so let's move from the pressure cooker of the Incandenza family to the man who is supposed to be holding this entire system together, Headmaster Charles Tavis.
And the administrative reality of the ETA is, I mean, it's a total nightmare. Yeah. And we see Tavis confronting it in these pre-dawn hours. He's standing by the living room window in his leather slippers. His face is sleep-swollen, and it's twitching with all these permutations of worry.
He's drinking hazelnut decaf, and he's physically leaning into the window glass just to feel the mean chill against his forehead. It's like he's trying to absorb the environmental stress that he's constantly fighting against.
This scene really paints him as this immensely stressed figure. He's not some distant authority. He's grappling with chaos on a deeply personal level.
And that personal chaos is standing right next to him.
Yes. He's actively avoiding waking. The thing, it's not entirely impossible he may have fathered, who is sleeping nearby with claws on his chest. He's afraid to confront its potential look of terrible, calm, and accepting knowledge.
Which he suspects might just be his own imagination, like a projection of his own guilt or something.
It could be. And his lips are moving, but there's no sound. It's this silent battle against a personal reality that is just too complex and painful to even say out loud. And that just adds this immense weight to all his other administrative burdens.
So his personal life is just as complex and fraught as his professional one. Let's really dissect the details of that administrative nightmare, because it's a brilliant illustration of how the smallest imbalance at an elite institution can just cascade into a full-blown crisis.
Okay, so the ETA has an accredited capacity of 148 players. Ideally, 80 of those slots are reserved for males to maintain competitive balance and, the right housing ratios.
But the actual population in the fall of YDAU is 136. It's a small shortfall, but the critical part is that it skews heavily female, 72 female to 64 male.
And this seemingly minor numerical problem, it's just 4 extra girls. It has huge implications. The Academy can only house 68 girls comfortably under its licensing rules. So as 72, 4 of them have to be placed in male dorms, specifically the Prorector's dorm area.
And that is what triggers the major stress points for Tavis. You've got licensing and conservative parent problems. The source notes, pretty frankly, that adolescent glands are firing all over the place around co-ed hall bathrooms.
So Tavis is trying to juggle elite athletic development with the inevitable volatile consequences of hormones and teenage proximity. He's risking legal and financial fallout from parents if anything goes wrong.
And the imbalance also cripples the staff's efficiency. Since the Prorector staff is mostly male, twice as many male Prorectors, the morning drills have to be complexly staggered. The boys go in 2 sets, the girls in 3.
Which then messes up the C-Squad girls' early afternoon classes, creating staffing gaps and exhaustion down the line. Every single decision, from recruitment to room assignment, requires this endless, complex triage, and that just fuels his anxiety.
It's this chronic, layered instability that leads to Tavis's guiding principle, what he calls the logic of chaos.
Right. He's actually formalized this high-stress state into a philosophy. He calls it reverse Buddhism or total worry.
That concept is so critical. Instead of achieving inner peace through, detachment and minimizing desire, Tavis achieves control through maximum engagement with every single detail. He cultivates anxiety as a necessary management tool.
He has to constantly hold all the priorities in his head at the same time, all with urgent consideration rankings, schedules, corrector hiring, parent tension, and he's constantly weighting them against one another. He doesn't solve one problem and then move on to the next.
No, he has to perpetually anticipate every possible failure. Total worry is the high-functioning stress state required to keep a system as volatile as the ETA from completely collapsing.
He's weaponized his own anxiety to maintain control. He is the master of calculated, sustained panic.
And it is this level of chaotic intensity that he demands from the players who are assembling in the Grey Dawn. So let's join the A-team for their special perk, the Dawn Drills.
The privilege of being the best is you get hauled out of bed, still crusty-eyed and pale, to drill al fresco in the cold until the indoor facility, the lung, gets erected and inflated. This is an environment of controlled suffering.
Halen Condenza is feeling that physical toll immediately. He's chilled, even though he's wearing his late father's thick alpaca tennis jacket. And his poor circulation, which is a detail that suggests his own coping methods, maybe tobacco or marijuana use, makes a cold feel even worse.
And he winces as the cold air hits his one bad tooth. It's this sharp, immediate connection right back to his fragmentation nightmare.
The conditioning is immediately grueling. It starts with sprints up the ETA hill, rackets flailing, making what the source calls these half-hearted warrior noises. The expected result is physical failure.
Somebody always throws up a little. It's like the drill's reveille. It's expected.
But today, because of sweets from the night before, there's multiple retching. It's a visceral, widespread confirmation that the physical demands are being tested beyond the limit. The body is in open revolt against the intensity right at the start of the day.
And presiding over this whole theater of pain is Coach Stitt. He's up in his insulated, weather-immune crow's nest. His physical isolation just makes his presence more menacing. His bullhorn is described as scarier when you can't see him, amplifying this unseen authority that governs their suffering.
And what terrifies Hal, it isn't the cold or the pain, it's the constant, non-negotiable danger to Mario. Mario is positioned precariously on the railing of Stitt's nest, leaning way out over the court to film the drills.
And the only thing keeping him from diving, Bullock's camera first, onto the net, is a beefy, unnamed staff member who has to constantly grip the back of Mario's heavy Velcro vest.
That image just perfectly encapsulates the Incandenza family's life at the Academy.
It constantly scares hell out of Hal. Mario's purpose requires him to be in a space of absolute physical peril, and he needs unwavering physical support to prevent a catastrophic collapse.
If that support structure fails, the Incandenzas fail. It's a daily ritual of high-wire trust and danger.
And the drills themselves are this rotating exercise in precision and pain. The quartets move through 8 courts. On courts 1 and 2, they're hitting balls into these tiny squares of electricians' tape, a quest for unnatural precision.
And it's met with Stitt's acidic, low pH rejoinders if they miss the mark.
Then you get to the overhead drill, tap and whack, on court 4, which can be converted into a disciplinary puker. And Hal is struggling because of his heavily compromised left ankle. He tore it when he was 15.
He's wearing an air stirrup inflatable brace that looks exactly like what he needs to escape from a medieval torture implement.
And Stitt, projecting his voice even without the bullhorn, calls Hal out specifically for compromising his form. He's letting the ball get a little much behind him, which suggests that his fear of the ankle is making him pull back from total commitment.
And Hal's reaction is just so ingrained. He doesn't argue, he doesn't look up, he just raises his stick in acknowledgement. Years of this conditioning have made him immune to staff humiliation. He recognizes it as part of the structure, not a personal critique.
He just submits to the process of being called out.
And you see the human toll everywhere. Ortho Stuss is yawning and shivering. Kyle Coyle is openly complaining that dawn drills are a poor reward for being a high-level player.
And then there are these ominous, fragmented details of institutional secrets. The absence of J.J. Penn amid troubling leg rumors, and the recent sight of monitor glass shards near the fence.
Which is linked to an alleged incident involving Otis P. Lord having a broken Hitachi monitor over his head.
Violence and systemic stress are just woven into the fabric of daily life here. It's part of the background noise.
Even the brief Gatorade break is ritualized. They puff out their cheeks with the liquid, mangle it with their teeth and tongue, spit it out in a controlled expulsion, and then they take a measured drink for real.
It's this tiny, strange moment of controlled self-abuse and regulation before the next round of sprints. Everything here is hyper-controlled, even the most basic physical necessities.
And this controlled suffering leads directly to Stit's core philosophical monologue. He delivers it after the cardiovascular finale of Side to Sides, and he confronts the sluggish drilling and the players' complaints about the cold.
He argues so forcefully against the idea of adjusting to conditions. He asks how if it's always something too hot, too cold, too windy.
And then Stitt expands the list of what is too. He adds insects, bad lighting, heckling opponents, injury, and then this bizarre but crucial addition. A too pretty girl in audience watching.
This is where we need to slow down and really analyze the implication. Why is an attractive distraction equivalent to a physical injury?
Because Stitt's philosophy demands the rejection of the entire external world. Anything that draws the player's focus outside the lines, be it physical pain, environmental annoyance, or a romantic distraction, is an obstacle to be ignored, not accommodated.
The player's not supposed to adjust.
Yeah.
The player is supposed to create a new reality. He proclaims that the borders of the court define a sheltered second world, the place where cold and pain do not exist.
In this second world, there is only the player, the tool, the ball, and the opponent. And they're all unified by a purpose past sluggardly self and complaints about uncomfort.
The world outside the lines is defined by chaos and personal limitations. The world inside is shelter, purpose, and total commitment.
But the enforcement of this philosophy is, well, it's chilling. He grows quiet, almost softly threatening. He notes that if a player finds it hard to transition between the external world and this purified internal world, that difficulty can be resolved permanently.
He threatens to arrange for you gentlemen not to leave ever here. He says he'll erect the Testarlung now, bring them sleeping bags, meals, and buckets for hygiene, and demand they stay inside the court lines until they achieve citizenship.
And he slates his own experience at Gymnasium Kaiserslautern, where he apparently lived inside a court for months to learn how to live inside it.
The path to perfection is voluntary, permanent incarceration. That is the ultimate demand for total, painful surrender to the structure.
And Hal, the boy who's terrified his internal decay is visible to everyone, is asked where one applies for citizenship in this second world.
And Hal, spitting out his plug of Kodiak in a non-insolent way, responds with this profound insight. He says, "The human head, sir. The game's two heads, one world. One world, sir."
He pinpoints the true border. It isn't the white lines on the court, it's the mental commitment. The game is played between two minds, and that single unifying focus, the one world they create with their commitment, that's the sanctuary. That's the citizenship that eliminates the external, too.
Stitt laughs. He finds the response satisfying. The intensity is only released in action.
And now we have to make that necessary abrupt shift. We're leaving the manicured frozen chaos of the ETA and transitioning into the grim, necessary chaos of recovery at Ennet House and into the world of Don Gately.
The physical contrast is immense. We meet Don Gately, he's live-in staff, and he's driving director Pat Montishan's cherished black 1964 Ford Aventura. It's a powerful antique Mustang variant that is terrifically tight and sleek.
Gately is huge, 188 centimeters, 128 kilograms, and he barely fits. The gear shift actually pinches his hip. And yet, the experience of driving this car defines his new spiritual reality.
He holds profoundest spiritual feelings for this vehicle. It feels like being strapped into a missile and launched at the site of a domestic errand. It represents controlled power and purpose in his new life.
The great irony, of course, and the immediate legal jeopardy he's in, is that Gately doesn't even have a license. He lost it permanently after multiple DUIs.
And yet Pat Montishan allows him to drive her priceless classic car. It's a mark of incredible trust, a recognition of his massive psychic turnaround, despite the obvious legal risk for both of them.
And that legal risk is Gately's shadow. He's required to regularly attend district court venues wearing this slightly irregular green sport coat to address reparations for a very long list of past charges. I mean, it's a list that illustrates a life lived entirely without internal regulation.
Let's run through it. We got bad check, forgery, malicious destruction, 2 D&Ds, public urination, break and enter.
And the absurd detail of possession with intent 38 Demerol tablets in a Pez container found in the back of a police cruiser. That Pez container is just a perfect symbol of his life before he surrendered.
But the most agonizing pressure point for him was the potential Murder 2 investigation. It stemmed from a botched burglary at an upscale Brookline home. Gately spent 8 months in just indescribable psychic cringing, waiting for the legal hammer to drop on this very serious charge.
And then, inexplicably, the case just vanished. It was taken over by a shadowy federal entity called the Non-Specific Services Bureau.
A move that sparked rumors pointing far north to knuckle-political bodies in Quebec.
The significance of this vanishing case just cannot be overstated. For someone who is trying to rebuild their life based on radical honesty and accountability, having a serious felony just disappear into a bureaucratic and geopolitical black hole must be profoundly unsettling.
His due consequence was just seemingly swallowed by a larger, chaotic external force he can't even comprehend. It's an unstable kind of freedom.
So the only outstanding legal matter that remains immediate is driving with a suspended license, and that carries a mandatory 90-day jail term. This is his actionable threat.
And Gately is physically large and tough enough to survive MCI Billerica or Deer Island. The sources remind us he once beat a bouncer bloody with the unconscious body of the first bouncer he encountered.
But his focus has completely dramatically shifted. This is the ultimate psychic turnaround. His overwhelming fear is no longer the physical brutality of prison.
No, it's the spiritual danger. The high availability of substances in jail versus the scarcity of AA meetings and the rigorous structure of recovery.
He now claims AA has him by the mental curlies, and he will go to literally any lengths to stay clean. This commitment to radical sobriety now completely dictates his life, his motivations, and his fear of being locked up.
And this commitment is entirely rooted in the philosophy of the House Director, Pat Montesian. She admitted Gately based only on his grim honesty and hopelessness, citing those qualities, along with desperation, as the only things you need to begin recovery.
Pat Montesian herself is a striking, powerful figure. She's described as both pretty and not. In her late 30s, her former life as a wealthy socialite was completely terminated when her drinking led to a major stroke, suffered during the DTs.
And she views that stroke as far and away the best thing that's ever happened to her.
Which is an incredible thing to say.
It is, because it violently removed her choice. It forced her to surrender. And the physical evidence of that painful surrender is visible every single day, and it reinforces her doctrine.
Let's look at that physical toll. She speaks with over-enunciated slurring. She has a rictus in the right side of her face, and her right arm and hand are atrophied. It's a semi-claw encased in a black plastic brace. Her walk is a visible, god-awful lurch.
She was literally forced to communicate by Morse code blinks for months, unable to speak. And yet, even during that time, just to demonstrate willingness, she tried to eat a rock when she was instructed to. She chipped both her incisors doing it.
Wow.
Yeah, and that is the extreme physical proof of her concept of surrender. It's a painful, illogical submission to instruction.
So her recovery doctrine, therefore, is based entirely on action, not on belief. She cites a state study proving that over 60% of inmates serving life sentences had been in blackouts when they committed their crimes. Their bodies were operating without their minds.
Which confirms that physical action and habit have to come before the mental state. She believed Gately didn't need to understand or believe in the concept of a higher power. He just needed to act. If he did the right things and kept doing them for long enough, what Gately thought and believed would magically change.
The body leads the mind out of the fragmentation and chaos.
Exactly. And this is where we see Gately's initial struggle with the required AM and PM prayer. He saw it as total hypocrisy. He treated the ritual like setting an oven temp according to a box's direction. He was just following the instructions.
To avoid the acute embarrassment of kneeling in his underwear and talking to the ceiling, he would pretend he was looking for his shoes under the bed while he performed the prescribed ritual.
He was a perfect hypocrite. He was following the steps out of a fear of jail, not out of any belief in the process.
And yet, despite his total lack of faith, after about 5 months of this radical, involuntary adherence to protocol, the desire and compulsion had been removed. The miracle occurred in spite of his hypocrisy.
He realized it suddenly. He was riding the green line at 4:30 in the morning, and he realized he hadn't even thought about Demerol or weed for days. He was completely bewildered by it. How could a power he didn't even believe in magically free him from that mental cage when he was just going through the motions?
He was so frustrated by the illogical nature of his own recovery that the simple action, not the intellectual faith, had freed him, that he cracked a fake wood tabletop by beating his head against it at a Sunday beginners meeting.
He was angry that the truth required such painful blind surrender.
And his counselor, Eugenia Martinez, addressed this intellectual resistance using the classic Boston AA Betty Crocker cake mix analogy.
Right. Gately didn't need to understand or believe the complicated chemistry of baking. If he just followed the directions on the side of the box exactly, a cake would result. Gately was free only through radical adherence to protocol, regardless of what his internal monologue was telling him.
This submission to ritual, this following of instructions regardless of personal belief. We see it most clearly in Gately's role as the unlikely chef at Ennet House.
It's deeply ironic, isn't it? Gately, who for 12 years subsisted only on subs and corporate snacks, and had apparently never eaten broccoli or a pear before Ennet House, is now tasked with feeding all the residents.
And his menu is rigid and, well, poor. It's a dense meatloaf padded with cornflakes, leathery shake and bake, and spaghetti where he boils the pasta for almost an hour.
Which renders it incredibly soft and flavorless. It's an act of service, but it's one defined by his own past limitations.
But the act of cooking is deeply emotional for him. Gately, the massive former criminal, serves the food with his huge scarred face hovering lunarly above the steaming pans. He looks like a nervous bride full of anxiety and hopes for everyone's full enjoyment.
And he uses no oven mitts. He just sets the pans down on the table with his huge jail-tattooed hands. It's this shocking, vulnerable juxtaposition of physical toughness and extreme emotional neediness, and it's all centered on whether people enjoy his horrible cooking.
And his anxiety is well-founded, because the food is awful. And the other residents, who are masters of passive critique, have to find these subtle ways to avoid insulting the massive, anxious chef. The entire meal becomes this high-stakes social ritual of avoidance.
Randy Lentz, for instance, offers the perfect oblique praise. He notes that Gately's food is the kind that helps you really appreciate whatever you're drinking along with it.
Right, which shifts the focus from the food itself to the necessary accompaniment. Clever.
And Jeffrey Day is equally artful. He notes that Gately's food offers a refreshing change because you don't feel bloated after eating it.
Which is a quiet suggestion that he can't physically eat enough of the dense, dry meal to feel full, implying its poor quality without ever saying it directly.
Exactly. And the most direct, yet still oblique, critique is the spaghetti skit. Wade McDade and Dooney Glynn performed this bit just outside the kitchen, so Gately can only hear fragments and not the full, painful context.
They call it extra fine spaghetti, and McDade tells Glynn, "Leave your teeth at home, boy."
That is a sharp, painful jab directly at the excessively soft, hour-boiled texture of the pasta. It requires no chewing, which emphasizes this loss of necessary structure.
And that detail, "leave your teeth at home," is such a chilling echo of Howlin' Condensa's nightmare about his teeth crumbling and disintegrating into grit.
It is. Even in these two separate worlds, the fear of fragmentation and the sort of necessary softness of a world that lacks rigor is a universal, unspoken trauma.
But despite the quality of the food, the communal meal is a critical ritual. Tiny Ewell and others, they understand the emotional and structural stakes, so they offer lavish praises and excessive yummy noises.
The importance of the positive affirmation and the community support outweighs the taste. The ritual of eating together, served by their massive chef, reinforces the structure of recovery.
So that brings us to our final synthesis. We've spent time in two incredibly demanding, high-stakes environments. What is the core connection between the Enfield Tennis Academy and the Ennet House Recovery Facility?
I think they are both environments of radical self-discipline achieved through relentless repetition and pain, and they both demand a total, painful surrender of the individual's previous will. They are both attempts to create a controlled second world to escape external chaos.
The ETA, the goal is to create a perfect physical second world. Hal and his cohort are forced to ignore every signal of physical pain, the cold, the churning stomach, the bad tooth, the injured ankle, to achieve that mental state of focus that Stitt defines by the court's lines. The body has to submit to the will of the game.
And at Ennet House, the goal is to create a perfect spiritual second world. Don Gately and the residents force the mind to ignore its deep systemic pain, the cravings, the shame, the legal peril, through the ritualistic 12 steps, through prayer and through action. The mind has to submit to the will of the program, regardless of belief.
So in both cases, citizenship or freedom requires surrendering one's will and one's previous identity to the rules of the institution.
Yeah, whether those rules are commanded by Coach Stitt's fierce vision of the court or enforced by the ferocious Francis Gainey's guidance in AA, the principle is the same. Submission is liberation from the self.
The truth is unavoidable. To escape fragmentation, whether it's the fear of your physical foundation crumbling, like Hal experienced, or the terrifying fragmentation of consciousness through a blackout, which Pat Montesian survived, it requires we have analyzed the immense effort, the high emotional cost, and the surprising necessity of structure that's required to create these controlled, purposeful internal worlds. We've seen the sheer labor of focus and surrender. It requires a sustained state of either total worry or total surrender.
And that leaves us with a provocative thought, something that connects these extreme institutional demands to our own daily lives. If both Howling Condenza and Don Gately were driven to such extreme, painful lengths to escape fragmentation, one fearing his teeth crumbling into shale, the other fearing his mind blacking out during a violent crime, what are the small daily concessions we make that prevent us from achieving that radical, painful, yet powerful state of focused existence?
Think about it. What is the environmental too? The too much noise, the too much distraction, the too much comfort that prevents us from finding that sheltered, purposeful second world inside our own minds, inside our own minds? What world do we constantly try to adjust to instead of creating the focused reality that demands total commitment? That's what we leave you with to mull over. We'll see you for the next deep dive.